Welcome. My name is Walter Nixon. I am a program specialist here with Santa Ana Unified School District's Special Education Department. This is Enhancing IEP Effectiveness, Best Practices for Legal Compliance and Collaborative Engagement. Let's get started. I will be your host for this recording. I am a program specialist responsible for non-public schools and residential treatment centers. My colleague, Leilani Decato, has been instrumental in composing and editing and revising this presentation. She is a certificated learning and achievement specialist, former general education classroom teacher, and an ed specialist working primarily in the primary grades. She will be joining on several slides. So let's get involved. Our agenda: we'll first look at welcome and working agreements. Then we will discuss our professional learning objectives, followed by communication and collaboration best practices. We'll look at legally defensible IEPs, present levels to goals to FAPE offer, and then provide some time for questions and my contact information as well as Leilani's, so that you may reach out at any time to get any questions that you may have answered. I recognize that you are learning asynchronously via our Canvas module, but we are always accessible via email, and we expect to get back to you within 24 hours in most cases. So our working agreements: we are inclusive, we are learners, we assume positive intent, and we are considerate. Our learning objectives for today: participants will learn effective practices for legally drafting. Participants will learn effective practices for drafting legally defensible, individualized education programs by employing strategic collaboration and communication among IEP team members, including parents and students, composing measurable present level statements based on student ability, formulating SMART goals from current relevant data, and intentionally presenting the free, appropriate public education offer. Our first objective: enhancing IEP effectiveness, employing strategic collaboration and communication. Strategic collaboration. Our best practice tool right out of the gate is providing you with a timeline. Special education and timelines in California is a great way to prepare for your year at large. Prior to the start of the school year, produce a calendar comprised of your caseload IEPs to ensure legal compliance. Strategic communication best practice tool. Begin the school year by opening lines of communication with parents via a welcome letter, email, or phone call. If possible, share a personalized positive comment about the student. You always want to start on the best note possible, considering where you may go for the year. Here's an example of the case manager template I used for years as a middle school teacher, ed specialist at Sierra Prep, and then at Godinez Fundamental High School. Parents typically appreciate that notice coming home with a student, or that notice being sent electronically within the first day or two of school. If I am really able to get it to parents before the first day of school, they know that I am thinking about them and their students and planning accordingly in advance. It's a great way to start. Very strategic. Moving back to the presentation, you want to schedule IEP meetings with team. So you may use a variety of resources. That could be Google Calendar invites, that could be Outlook calendar invites. Whatever mechanism you use would be wise to be familiar with that system and reach out to your mandatory members, your admin, your gen ed teacher, your special ed teacher, parent or guardian or holder of ed rights, and the student. When over 18, it's mandatory, but we like to reach out to our students and have them participate as soon as they believe they're ready and the team agrees. Related service providers of areas being discussed are also expected to be invited, as well as that interpreter if needed. Be sure to communicate with the team and update digital calendar invite when meetings are canceled, rescheduled, or if the location changes. One pro tip is to send a reminder email to all team members 1 week before the IEP meeting. Write the email ahead of time and send it with schedule send. It's one really smart way to get a jump. And I'll take you to another template that is the IEP reminder that many sites use to keep all members on the IEP team informed. That's pretty much in-house. So I guess back-facing, not front-facing for the public, but our admin, gen ed teacher, and service providers such as adaptive PE teachers, educational related mental health service providers, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, and visual, our VI service providers. So keep everyone in the loop, and when things change, as we know they do on the fly, keeping a cohesive team will avoid additional problems and unnecessary hangups. Moving back to the presentation. Communication before the IEP. Again, send that meeting notice home to parents 2 weeks before the IEP meeting, excuse me. One set of best practice tools here are one link for collecting parent input. Much of this information could certainly be found in ARIES. However, when you are reaching out to a parent and you're trying to update things like the demographics page, this is a great way to do it when there are changes from a year to year or even month to month. So staying abreast on those changes is crucial. Another best practice tool. Here is a self-reported student profile exercise. This is simply a template for students to share a little bit about themselves. Can certainly be done using this digital format. It can also be done in a Q&A format, but giving students an opportunity to contribute to their future planning and educational design is key to their success, to building student agency. Once again, very strategic. Another best practice tool would be that collection of general education teacher input. And so here is an example of a form that you may use. If you are going to use it, of course, you want to make a copy and customize it as you see fit, and then get it out to your teachers well in advance of any IEP meetings so that you could look at the information. If there are conversations that need to follow, discussions about implementing the prior goals, or discussions about looking at future goals, a conversation about baselines and present levels is always appropriate in terms of consultation to support a student in a general ed classroom environment for their best success, best outcomes. Okay, so here lastly, we have a SMART goals template that we've included, another form that you could use to make sure that you are developing SMART goals. We'll go into that a bit later in the presentation, but this PDF allows you to structure specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound goals for students. Reminder, notify a coordinator if parent indicates intent to bring an advocate or plans to audio record. Again, these are all things that should happen before the IEP. Communication during the IEP, our best practice tool. Well-run IEP meetings require teamwork, so organization matters. Having an agreement for one to be a note taker, an editor, and a presenter or facilitator are vital. As case managers, you certainly can develop an agenda and dole out responsibilities prior to the meeting if there is that opportunity, if there is a staffing. And then you want to offer to review and answer questions about procedural safeguards in the native language during the meeting. Once they've been provided, perhaps they were provided prior to the meeting, but to start the meeting even before the agenda, asking if there are any questions to clarify is a great way to get started. Introductions of all your team members. Certainly teachers may know one another, but for the sake of parents and other service providers who may not be as familiar with everyone on the team, it is essential to begin with introductions, review the agenda, and inquire about time constraints. Be sure to note the time constraints and build an effective plan for that meeting. You would begin a try, of course, by reviewing the MDA, progress on goals, and the draft IEP. Ask questions to elicit parent participation throughout the meeting and document in the notes. One pro tip is, does this match what you are seeing at home? Great question. Does this match what you are seeing at home? Finding means to clarify the information being presented to parents as you go is critical for their understanding and for preparing to present a FAPE offer later and preparing to discuss or come to an agreement on what should and what should not remain in the IEP. You update the services and placement. We offer a FAPE during the meeting, never before, and your signature and consent page have all members sign for attendance. If parents want time to review before signing consent, document that in the notes and provide them with a copy of the IEP for review. At the conclusion of the meeting, parents leave with a copy of the IEP. Communication after the IEP. Best practice tool is to share the IEP at a glance with staff members who directly support the student, including general education teachers and paraprofessionals. Moving on to our second objective, enhancing IEP effectiveness, composing measurable present level statements. Present levels in IDEA. IDEA requires that each IEP include a statement of the student's present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, including how the student's disability affects his or her involvement and progress in the general education curriculum. A well-written present levels is the foundation upon which the rest of the IEP is developed to specify appropriate goals, services, supports, accommodations, modifications, and FAPE offer. Legally defensible present levels. Let's look into this a bit more. Legally defensible present levels describe a student's current academic achievement and functional performance. They summarize the student's strengths, learning styles, and how she or he learns best, whether that be a small group, visual supports. There could be a small group setting that uses kinesthetic movement. There could be a rotation in the classroom that a student tends to perform better within. And so these are all helpful tips that will go into the present level, further discern exactly how a general education teacher or another service provider would most benefit producing that service. We want to describe a student's areas of need and how they relate to district benchmarks or state standards. Legally defensible present levels provide a baseline to measure progress and develop appropriate goals. They include input from IEP team members, including parents and students. Beware of information that repeats from year to year without any change. Your responsibility as a case manager is to update and ensure a fresh, current IEP. Present levels elements. Strengths, preferences, and interests are gathered from assessments, work samples, observations, and IEP team input, including parents and students. Present levels elements are parent input and concerns relevant to educational progress. They're gathered from interviews with the parent input forms, and parent input during the meeting. Assessment results, such as SBAC or Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortium, CA, the California Alternate Assessment, LPAC, the English Language Proficiency Assessment of California, and your PE tests are all located in ARIES. Hearing and vision is input by the school nurse at the initial and eligibility evaluation. Be sure to be in contact with your nurse at your site well in advance of an initial or an eligibility evaluation to make sure that she or he has that information and is prepared to work with the student to provide that input for the IEP. Do not leave sections blank or write not applicable. Present levels elements. Present level domains. pre-academic, academic, functional skills, communication development, gross fine motor development, social, emotional, behavioral, vocational, adaptive daily living skills, and health. Present levels elements what to include, current performance, strengths, areas of improvement, descriptive and objective data from data sources such as parent, teacher, and team input. We'll make sure that we collect that prior to the meeting. Standardized assessments, curriculum-based assessments, student work samples, observation records. Please keep in mind, to present student work samples at IEP meetings is absolutely a best practice tool. We really like to be able to provide that visual example for a parent to show them what the student is working on and what that performance looks like. Here's an example of what not to do on the left and an example of what to do on the right. You see the example on the left has all sections blank. We will never leave any sections blank. The example on the right has most sections completed, but I still see 2 sections that would need a statement, and A would not be appropriate. You would need to write in some information that gives insight to what the student is doing in the pre-academic, academic, and functional skills, and the social, emotional, or behavioral area. Let's try it. Are these present levels legally defensible? Why or why not? We see the student was administered the Woodcock-Johnson 4 tests of oral language and tests of achievement, Form A. The norms were based on grade 6.1, and his scores are as follows. We have the oral language tests first in clustered test grade equivalency or clustered test grade equivalency order from left to right. So we have oral language less than K, broad oral language K.5, oral expression K.1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is very overwhelming, all caps. There's not a lot of distinction from one cluster to the next. And so just when I look at it, I think I'm not really sure what I'm to do with this. Having been a case manager for many, many years, through the decades, I could interpret some of this information, but it is certainly not a legally defensible set of data, unfortunately. We don't have rate, so we don't have how often these things are happening. We don't have a setting where it's happened. We don't have any context to really be able to break down and understand how the student is doing, what they're actually doing. It does show us the what, but it does not show us the how. I think that's very crucial. Enhancing IEP effectiveness, formulating SMART goals. Legally defensible goals relate directly to present levels. So you can see the progression here. Present levels are written in each identified area of need in the present levels. Present levels are tied to current grade level standards or trellis backward through the strand to find the standard the student is working toward. Present levels that are legally defensible are linguistically appropriate if student is an English learner. Legally defensible goals relate directly to present levels by having connectivity to the goals and objectives from previous years. So we want to see the progression. Beware of goals that repeat from year to year without any change. Certainly you may have some results that show a student has not made a goal, has not successfully achieved a goal, but what you would obviously need to do is alter that goal. You would need to look at that data, determine what that student can do, change the goal. Be sure that the baseline and the present level are legally defensible. Be sure that you can get from the objective in the goal up to the main goal. As we stated earlier about trellising backward, once you get to that point, you want to move forward. So make sure there's connectivity to the goals and objectives from previous years. Never any repeats. Moving on, goal elements. We have a baseline, which is aligned with the goal and specifically states what the student can do as it relates to what the student needs to do. We have an annual goal, so it needs to be specific, clear, and concise. We will talk a bit about SMART goals moving forward. We have dates. All dates are accurate dates that reflect 1 year's growth and include short-term objectives in appropriate increments. We'll talk about those increments a little bit bit later as well. Short-term objectives must be thoughtfully developed steps to reach the goal. Consider the skill or knowledge progression as well as levels of support. Goal baselines. We have an example on the left of what goal baselines are. They are aligned with present levels and goal. They are the same skill or concept as goal. They are measurable, and they are succinct and objective. Baselines are not cut and paste present levels. Baselines are not different skill or concept from goal. They are not subjective, and they are not a summary of assessment scores. Here's a goal baseline example, what it is versus what it isn't. We'll look at the left first. After independently reading a mid-second grade passage, the student correctly answered 2 of 5 inferential short answer questions. For example, why and how questions involving feelings and predictions. For what the are not, the student achieved a standard score of less than 40 on the passage comprehension subtest of the Woodcock-Johnson Tests of Achievement 4th edition, scoring in the very low range. So it does include a formal assessment score, but it doesn't give much more context at all. We don't know how many problems the student did. We just see the score, and if you're not familiar with the test, you may not have any way to really understand how this translates to classroom instruction. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. By specific, we mean the goal is concrete and tangible. By measurable, we mean the goal has an objective measure of success that everyone can understand. By attainable, we mean the goal is challenging, but achievable with resources available. By relevant, we mean the goal meaningfully contributes to larger objectives. And by timely, the goal has a deadline or a timeline of progress milestones. Key information. SMART goals are specific. The goal is concrete and tangible. The example shows a student will independently read grade level texts at a rate of 50 words per minute. Example, given 10 counter manipulatives, the student will solve addition problems within 20. The goals are concrete and tangible. Moving on, measurable. The goal has an objective measure of success that everyone can understand. An example of 4 out of 5 trials, or an example of 15 out of 20 problems correct, or an example of 8 out of 10 opportunities helps a general education teacher to really understand, to get a picture of what the instruction is going to look like at the end, what the grading is going to look like at the end. Simple score or percentage, grade equivalency does not quite give us that context. SMART goals. Is it specific and measurable? Looking on the left, we see measurable examples, and on the right, we see not measurable. Student will read 10 CVC words with no more than 3 errors. That is the measurable goal. The not measurable goal might show that a student will improve reading or decoding skills, devoid of how many or how much of an increase. The next example, student will remain seated for 15 minutes during small group instruction. The non-example, or the not measurable example, shows that student will pay attention. Again, there's no rate. The last measurable example shows the student will write a paragraph with an introduction, 2 supporting details, and a conclusion. The not measurable goal reads, student will improve writing skills. Again, there's no there's no rate, there's no context. SMART goals are attainable. The goal is challenging but achievable with resources available. As you see our 3 examples on the left, student will increase reading fluency from 30 words per minute to 60 words per minute. It's an increase of 30 words. The second example, student will identify the operation, addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division, and solve 4 out of 5 word problems. Self-explanatory. Provides a context, provides a clear objective on what they will identify, what types of problems. And lastly, the student will select and use a self-regulation strategy from a choice board to manage frustration. Attainable, very good. SMART goals are relevant. The goal meaningfully contributes to larger objectives. Example, a reading comprehension goal contributes to a student's ability to access and comprehend grade level curriculum materials independently. And lastly, timely. SMART goals are timely, meaning the goal has a deadline, a timeline of progress milestones. Short-term benchmark dates should align with site, trimester, and semester report card dates. An example, for a goal by September 4th, 2025, and a short-term objective by November 1st, 2025. Moving on, the stranger test. Our goal is written so that a person unfamiliar with the student could read, understand, and implement it with no difficulty or misconception. On the left, we tried this when student makes verbal threats or hits with an open hand, or we try this. Student will print three to four word sentences using left, right, top, bottom letter formation. So the non-examples, when student demonstrates hostile behavior, and student will write sentences correctly. The dead man's test. A goal states what a student will do instead of what a student will not do. Traditionally, the dead man's test was used to determine behavior. Of course, we've since debunked that the dead man's test is not necessarily empirically valid. However, it has been around for so long as a harbinger in behavior studies, particularly applied behavioral studies. And so it is still considered as an example we can take from. Can a dead man do these target tasks? Student will not swear at peers during passing periods. Student will write homework assignments in his daily planner. Student will not push peers while waiting in line. So of the three, can a dead man not swear at peers during passing periods? Sure. Can a dead man write homework assignments in his daily planner? No, the dead man would not be able to because the dead man's dead. And then third example, student will not push peers while waiting in line. Well, a dead person could do that. Typically, when you refer to the will not, you are moving in the direction of a dead man's test. How would you rewrite the target tasks that do not pass the dead man's test? Rather than saying the student will not swear at peers during passing periods, you would determine a reduced rate of swearing based on what the baseline is. So if the student swears 3 times during recess, you may want to limit that to 1 time and eventually to 0 times. That would be one example. For the second bullet, where student will write homework assignments in his daily planner, a dead man wouldn't be able to do that. So it wouldn't need to be rewritten. However, it is still not a SMART goal, right? We don't have, outside of daily planner, we don't have much context. We do have a rate for daily planner, but how many times out of a week, how many days in a week would be an effective way to provide a measure for that second bullet? And then lastly, the student will not push peers while waiting in line. We would need to look at the baseline and determine if the student pushed others' peers while waiting in line 5 times, we might want to indicate a reduced amount, 3 times or 4 times, 2 times, 1 time. And we would want to make sure that it is time bound. Let's move on. Please write a SMART goal to align with one of the following baselines. Remember, SMART is specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Student solves double-digit addition problems, no regrouping with 20% accuracy. How might we rewrite a goal that was SMART using the initial student solves double-digit addition problems, no regrouping with 20% accuracy? Let's think on that one for a minute. We can certainly see that there's the task. So double-digit addition problems, right? Without regrouping, we see a 20% accuracy. Might there be support that we can add? It is specific. The 20% accuracy is what's a little bit difficult, I think, not quite measurable, although it does give a percentage. Maybe if we said in 2 of 10 trials, right? So that general education teacher could understand exactly how to measure that. Is it attainable? It is attainable. It's relevant if we're talking about a math class or a math issue, a math deficit. And then it would need to have that measure again for timeliness. So there's one way to rewrite that. Let's move on. Enhancing the IEP effectiveness, intentionally presenting the FAPE offer. Our best practice tool comes from the IRIS Center, that is Vanderbilt University's special education consortium. The goal for this tool would be to intentionally present the offer of FAPE by going through each step as an IEP team, where you evaluate and identify the individual student needs, you identify the goals, you, for each goal, identify services and supports, you list those goals, services and supports, accommodations, and then as a team, you determine the placement to address each goal. If the student can be successful with those special education and related services delivered in the general ed setting, then you would place the student in the general ed setting. If the student could not, then you would move along the continuum to ensure a placement where the student could actually have success working with that curriculum and those other accommodations and services, as well as modifications. Factors to consider. When contemplating each placement option, the IEP team should consider individualization. It's based on students' unique needs and goals, and taking into account parent and student preferences, the benefit to the student, like the academic, behavioral, functional, and social emotional benefits, effect on peers, the effect the student's presence might have on the education of other students in the classroom, both favorable and less favorable, such as encouraging the development of empathy and understanding, and effects on instructional time. Other factors to consider are appropriateness and inclusion, which is a balance between the delivery of an appropriate education that will result in the student making progress and being educated with students without disabilities. I think of this as a bit of the slide rule. We want to make sure that the student is in that gen ed setting to the fullest extent possible, but we are really measuring the success that they're having academically, behaviorally, functionally, and of course, the impact on their social emotional well-being is also critical. Use of supplementary aids and services, how accommodations or modifications, such as extended time, modified assignments, special equipment can support the student. These go beyond accommodations in the classroom provided by a teacher in many cases. A case manager is able to coordinate, when a case manager is able to coordinate the supplementary aids and services that support a student's growth and educational benefit, that student is going to see progress. And in my experience, that student's going to be a lot more appropriately engaged. Service offer of FAPE. The offer of FAPE is an IEP team decision, always an IEP team decision. Special education and related services are determined at the IEP meeting after team discussion. Remember, data drives goals, goals drive services. I'll say it again. Data drives goals, goals drive services. Placement decisions must be based on the least restrictive environment. IDEA states that students with disabilities should be taught alongside their peers who do not have disabilities as much as possible. All students begin as gen ed students. Support services and aids for special education should be based on evidence-based practices to the fullest extent possible. Services offer of FAPE. Service delivery options considered. The team must discuss and document service delivery options considered. The team must first consider placement in the general education classroom with supports prior to recommending a more restrictive setting all or part of the day, as we talked about when we looked at the visual provided by the IRIS Center. General education with supplemental aids and services, general education with related services, general education with specialized academic instruction, general education services with specialized academic instruction and related services, specialized academic instruction for the majority of the school day with related services, specialized day school, separate facility, public or non-public, with no general education students. So as you can see, we go progressively from the general education setting with those aids and services to more restrictive, all the way to hospitalization. Harmful effects. The team should discuss any possible harmful effects that a more restrictive environment could have on the student. Um, Things to consider and include are access, instructional opportunities, academic rigor, social needs, social emotional considerations, and self-esteem. Sample statement. The IEP team determines that even with the provision of supplementary aids and services, students' IEP could not be implemented satisfactorily in the general education environment. Accommodations, modifications, and supplementary services, aids, and services and other supports for student and or school personnel. On this area of the IEP, we must list accommodations, modifications, and or supplemental aids and services and or supports offered for the student and offered for school personnel required for educational benefit. Supplementary aids and services. Check the appropriate boxes if the supports are for the student and or school personnel. We want to ensure start and end dates align with current and future IEP dates. We will select the location where the accommodations, modifications, and or supplementary aids and services will be provided. And remember, goals drive services. I'll say it again, goals drive services. Service delivery. The IEP team determines the special education and related services that will provide educational benefit and facilitate progress on the goals for the student. Type of service, individual or group service, location, frequency, and duration of service delivery. Specialized academic instruction, or SAI, is not based on the amount of time a general education teacher may spend adapting curriculum for a student. Reminder, SAI is a core special education service, not a location. Duration and frequency for SAI are based on student need for instructional support provided by an education specialist. That would be extensive support needs or mild to moderate support needs, including adapting curriculum and or working with students. Services. Frequency. Indicate the frequency of the service being provided, such as daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, or any other frequency. Duration. Indicate duration of service and the number of times per frequency. Location. Select the location of where the service is provided to the student from the following: 3:30 for a public preschool, 5:10 for the regular classroom, that's gen ed or push-in, and 5:20 separate classroom and public integrated facility, pull-out SDC. Educational setting and the offer of FAPE. Physical education, you want to check the type of physical education student will be receiving. District of service, specify district providing the majority of services to the student. School of attendance, this is the school where the student is enrolled. Program setting, TKK or greater, ages 5 through 22. 400 would be the classroom or public day school. The educational setting, all special education services provided at students' school of residence. You must check yes or no. Are all special education services provided at the student's school of residence? You want to make sure that question is asked and answered. The team determines no, provide rationale in box, i.e. student is on an intra-district transfer. Next up, we have the percentage of time outside and in class and extracurricular and non-academic activities. You want to document the percentage of time the student is outside the regular environment by adjusting the percentages in the second box. Together, these percentages total 100%. I mentioned earlier that slide rule. This is a perfect example. You weren't sure of what I meant. When you get into the LRE calculator, you consider the full day, including lunch, recess, passing periods, etc. But there's only 100% of the time that you have in a day. And so you can go to the LRE calculator and it will help you to figure out the start time and end time for each day and the total minutes in a day. Critical information. Student will not participate in the regular class and extracurricular and non-academic activities. You want to document the regular education environments where the student will not participate with typically developing peers. Provide rationale for non-participation. Moving on to the educational setting, other agency services. Note other agency services the child is receiving. Promotion criteria, check the appropriate box. District criteria are the same for students without disabilities. Progress on goals or others should be noted if the child's curriculum has been modified to meet his or her unique needs. Parents will be informed of progress and how. Check the frequency and how the progress will be reported. Note, progress reporting should match frequency of report card schedule. For example, the elementary schools are on a trimester system. That's when report cards are to go out. Secondary is on a semester system. And that's when that's when progress reports are to go out. Activities to support transition. If the student is going through a transition, preschool to kindergarten, special education to general education, etc., document the activities to support the transition. Matriculation to 5th to 6th, 8th to 9th, and 12th to IEP should be included. The transition plan. The ITP must be completed in time to be in effect when the student reaches 16 years of age, or will reach 16 years of age before the next plan review. A best practice tool, engaging students in the planning and design of their IEPs by providing opportunities to lead or present at their IEP meeting will contribute to greater student agency, collaboration, and communication. Going back to that strategic communication at the start of our presentation, when we talked about getting the feedback, the self-reported profile from students, the All About Me is just one way to measure the interests that a kid has. When I say measure how much information, how much understanding the students have, how willing they are to talk about themselves in a context after school or in the next grade level or middle school or high school. You're giving them an opportunity to build what we would typically term soft skills, but realistically, these are college and career-ready future skills. They have to have that introspection. They have to have that ability to reflect and think on their feet to produce answers. Looking at this link, you'll see that there's a student rubric for IEP participation, and along the lines of a student's development, levels 1 through 4, you really get an idea if students have been to their IEP before. Just by going through this form and having a conversation, you can see where students are, and particularly specifically where they need to progress toward. The areas of IEP awareness, IEP participation, knowledge of IEP content, abilities and disabilities awareness, knowledge of rights and responsibilities, social and communication skills. This can actually turn into an informal assessment where you give a score. The rubric produces a score that then corresponds with a level of readiness, and that could be something that you go through ongoing with the student, or even with a group of students if they are working in an academic support class or they're interested in working on school projects or any college or career future endeavors. Assessment information, we want to use the Brigance transition with a survey or interviews, questionnaires that we've linked earlier in the presentation as well. Best practices would also include assessment information provided by multiple people regarding student performance in multiple environments based on naturally occurring experiences that is understandable and it's attained through instruments and methods sensitive to cultural diversity. That parent feedback form is a great way to start. Speaking with your students directly and updating that information yearly will allow students to have a reflective process, again, build student agency, and potentially lead to participating in or even leading their own IEP. We'd like to thank you for attending. Again, my name is Walter Nixon. I'm a program specialist here, and Leilani Decato is our certificated learning and achievement specialist. We are on call for questions, for planning, for support in general. We'd really like to see you all be successful enhancing IEP effectiveness. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care.